Well, welcome everybody. Today, we are so excited to welcome you to our short webinar and info series where we're going to be talking about how you can get prepared to list your estate, trust, or probate property. My name is Aaliyah, and I am a licensed real estate agent with Millennium Group and Keller Williams Capital Partners. And John, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is John Suckoch, and I'm an attorney here in the Columbus area.
So John and I work hand in hand together with multiple clients over the years who have had properties in estates and trust and probate to navigate that sale and to navigate the transfer of their assets so they can, again, sell property and make that move into wherever they're headed next in life. So today, we are going to spend about 30 minutes covering a couple of really important topics that we find we are constantly covering with our clients. So to start, we're going to go over the local economy and the real estate market here in Columbus. John is going to touch on some legal considerations for property sale and things to start thinking about if you do have a property that's in an estate or a trust. And then I will touch briefly on the big items to prepare your property and some of the mistakes that many sellers make that we want you to avoid. And then we'll end with a quick question and answer if anybody has any. And if not, feel free to reach out to us after the program today, and we are happy to connect and answer more questions. So let's dive into it. Unless, John, you have anything else to add? Okay.
Sounds good. I'm excited to hear what you have to say myself.
Okay. So we're first going to touch on the economy and local market. And I know you're here to learn about how to prepare your property, but the first step in preparing your property is to really have an understanding of the economy and the local market that you're in. Because ideally, you're wanting to sell your property for the most money, at least most sellers are. And so if you're in a position where you don't necessarily need to sell your property today, knowing what to look for in the economy and the local market so that you can time your sale is going to be a really important piece of the puzzle. So as you are navigating a potential sale of property here in the Columbus area or beyond, some of the economic factors that you are going to want to consider are the following. So unemployment, we all know that this is a big driver of the economy, and it also has a huge impact on the real estate market. The unemployment numbers are great to keep an eye on because they're going to show where the real estate market is headed in 30 to 60 to 90 days. Right now, we are under that 6% mark where unemployment is still in the healthy category. This is great because even though we know that inflation is high, which we'll talk about momentarily, we are not in a place where we have tons of people out searching for jobs and unemployed. This is great for the market because when people are employed, they are motivated to purchase because they have money. So when we've got a great employed economy, we've got people that are willing and able to purchase, which rises the level of interest and demand for property. The second item to keep an eye on in the local and the national economy is GDP growth. So again, we want to look and see how the economy is performing quarter after quarter. Is GDP growth growing in a positive way? You don't have to be an economist or a market expert to know what this looks like. So keep an eye on what the experts are saying and where the economy is headed overall with our GDP growth. And finally, inflation. This is going to have the biggest impact on the local real estate market and home values. Inflation is something to keep an eye on because it's going to make an impact on a couple of things. One, of course, being the value of homes. So if home values are inflated, it's going to make purchasing a little bit more difficult for first-time buyers or certain buyers in the market. And simultaneously, when inflation occurs, it typically tends to hit people at home. And what I mean by this is the cost of groceries goes up, the cost of gas goes up. And so when those go up, along with the cost of prices for homes, we tend to find ourselves in a position where demand for property may actually drop a little bit. And this is something that we have seen over the last 24 months as inflation has gone up. Luckily, we're not at record levels of inflation right now. So even though we are seeing some impact, the demand for property is still very high. An additional two factors that you want to consider when you're thinking about timing and planning for sale is what are interest rates? This is kind of the buzz topic right now in the world of real estate. And so keeping an eye on interest rates is going to be really important. A few years ago, rates dropped to some of the lowest that we'd seen in years and really in the history of Columbus, Ohio. When rates are really low, this allows for people to have more money in their pocket. It gives them more ability to purchase more house for the money that they have. When rates go up, this tends to limit people's monthly spending, limits their budget for a home, and sometimes can actually kick them all the way out of the market. So when rates are a little bit higher, we tend to see that some of those fair weather buyers leave the market. Fair weather buyers are people that are just there because money's cheap and it's easy to buy. So what I want you to be aware of is, what are interest rates at the time of which you're thinking of selling, and how is that going to impact your sale? Sometimes we have to sell regardless of timing or rates or condition, but knowing what the rates are is going to allow you to better prepare your property so that you can capitalize on whatever your market economy is when you go to sell. And then finally, new construction. And this is the number one driver of the Columbus real estate market right now. New construction is very undersupplied. What we're seeing is that with all new companies coming to Columbus and tons of new economic drivers, new construction companies have not been able to keep up. And so inventory is very, very, very low. And so what this means is that while we talk about unemployment, we talk about GDP, inflation, and interest rates, even while all of those could be performing maybe at a level that is not ideal for selling property, the fact that we have new construction levels so low has caused us to be very undersupplied in Columbus, which means that regardless of rates and regardless of inflation, buyers have demand and there's not enough homes for them to purchase. What this does is it drives prices, it drives competition, and it means that for the short term and for the long term, the next few years, Columbus is going to be a great place to buy and sell, especially if you are just a seller and you don't need to make a purchase on the other end. So those are some factors to think about here in the economy. And if you have questions about these, feel free to contact us. We'll reach out with our contact information for you to be able to reach out. But these are really important things to keep an eye on and to educate yourself on as a future or current seller. Finally, related to the real estate market in general, the Columbus real estate market is where we want to hone in on understanding what this looks like and what the predictions are for the next 1 to 3 years, especially if you have a property that will need to be sold. So something to consider and think about with the Columbus real estate market is, how quickly is the market moving? And in the real estate world, we measure this with a number or a statistic called the absorption rate. So the absorption rate, to kind of put it in easy terms to understand, basically is a number that tells us how quickly homes are selling on the market. And what we tend to see that in a balanced market, when there's enough homes for the number of buyers, it's an equal balanced market, inventory will sit approximately 5 to 6 months. What we're seeing is, even in the slowest times over the last 3 to 5 years, the absorption rate has been under 2 months in Columbus. So what this tells us is that we are still in a very strong seller's market. And again, with new construction being so undersupplied, we anticipate that this is going to continue for coming years, again, regardless of those major conditions like inflation or unemployment. So you're in a great city to be selling. The next thing to consider with the Columbus real estate market is it's neighborhood by neighborhood. So when you start asking people about how much will my home be worth, or what's the market like for my property, the real answer is that it's really going to depend on the location of your property. Certain pockets of Columbus are going to be selling faster for more money. Other pockets may take a little bit longer to sell. Some areas may have lots of buyers, others may not have as many. So understanding what your neighborhood economy, not just the Columbus and national economy, looks like is really going to be important for your sale. And the reason for this is that when your neighborhood differs from a neighborhood on the north side of town or the south side of town or central town, we want to make sure that we're putting a selling plan together that is actually going to target and tailor to your specific neighborhood market. So this is something that, again, we can talk with you about. We can pull data and statistics and show you what the trends are and how buyers are reacting in your specific neighborhood or area. And then the final local trend to be aware of, or the local thing to be aware of, is who is your buyer? So we want to know what kind of property you have and what kind of buyer it is going to attract. And the reason this is important is because a property that's going to attract a first-time home buyer may sell and have a different strategy that is different from that of a property that's maybe attracting a downsized buyer. And the reason for this is that downsized buyers, first time buyers, relocation buyers, they all have different amounts of money, financial positions, as well as their experience in the world is just different. And so the way we want to strategize and market to those people may look different. So again, it's not just about knowing how the overall national real estate market is doing, and even not even about how the Columbus market's doing, but how is your neighborhood performing? What buyers are we going to be attracting? And how can we strategize to make sure that we're going to capitalize on the sale of your property? And ultimately, that is why this is important. We want you to get the most money for your home, and we also want to make it easy for you. So John's going to touch on some of the legal considerations, and then we're going to jump back into what you can do to actually prepare your property. So take it away, John.
All right, thank you, Aaliyah. And again, I just want to say thanks, for inviting me today, and I really appreciate the opportunity to join you and talk about something that I enjoy, not just the legal side, but just love hearing, all the updates and especially what's going on in Columbus, which is, my hometown as well. So again, thanks for the opportunity to join you. Um, so from the legal perspective, what I'm going to focus on is identifying who the seller is and like basically who owns the property. In my world, really, and it sounds kind of simple and maybe a little bit silly, but it's really important to know who has title to the property. So I'm going to go through three different scenarios as to who owns the property and how that, kind of can impact, what you need to do to kind of prepare to get your property ready to be sold. So first and foremost, maybe the easiest of my three different scenarios would be, what if the property is owned individually or even jointly held? What does that mean? So say for an example, I own a home as an individual. Say I'm a single person, I own a home myself, and I want to first and foremost hire someone like Aaliyah to help me sell my home. To convey or transfer my house in this sale process from me as the owner to a buyer, that transfer takes place. The legal document is referred to as a deed. I think we've all probably heard of a deed. It is the legal document that transfers property from one person to another, or from one party to another party. If I'm the individual owner, then I simply sign the deed myself as the seller, and the buyer is going to sign the deed as the buyer. Or if there are two buyers, they will both sign. And that's a pretty easy, pretty straightforward transaction. A lot of folks that I talk to, and I fall into this category. I'm married. My wife and I own our home together. So we have a joint deed. We have a survivorship deed. I think a lot of people hear that and say, well, what does that really mean? Well, basically, both of us are on the deed. Both of us have title or ownership in our home. So if we're now selling a piece of property, Aaliyah is helping us maybe sell our home to a buyer or to buyers. Quite simply, we are both now signing the deed as the sellers, and we're both going to transfer that property through this real estate transaction to a buyer. And the other important thing, I'll just kind of touch on this, the other important thing with the survivorship deed, if something happens where I pass away, my wife will basically have full ownership of the property. She will acquire that without having to go through that probate process. And I'll touch on probate here in a second. But again, individually owned property or even jointly owned property, those transactions are very, very simple. Individually owned, I as an individual will sign that as the seller, sign that deed. And if it's a joint owned property, the joint owners, the joint tenants will both sign as sellers to transfer or convey that interest to a buyer. So next slide here, scenario number two. And this comes up a lot. I talk to a lot of people. I have a good number of clients that their property is actually owned by a trust. And, the first thing is that, why would you do this? I get this question all the time. Should I have a trust and should I put my house in it? So that's a conversation maybe for another day. But if your house is owned by a trust, why do folks do this? Well, a trust is just a legal tool. It has many, many advantages. For example, I might create a trust and put my property or assets in a trust because when I pass away, that property can transfer to a spouse or say to beneficiaries, maybe my kids, without going through probate. So that's one main reason why people might have a trust and put their property in it. There's also other types of trusts. Like you can have trusts that are not only set up to ensure assets pass without going through probate, but other folks will actually create a trust and put their house or put property in the trust because that is a way to protect that property or that asset from a nursing home. So we all probably heard of the situation where someone goes into a nursing home and they have to spend their assets, and that includes maybe selling and spending the proceeds from the sale of their home. So a trust can be a really, really good vehicle to not only help you avoid probate, but also to help you protect your property from the nursing home. Now, with a trust, there are two parties that we need to identify and we need to talk about here today, because this is important when it comes to transferring property from that trust, maybe to a buyer. There's a grantor or the maker of the trust. So that's the person who establishes the trust. And then a trust is always going to have a trustee. Okay. The grantor is the one that establishes the trust and puts things in the trust, but the trustee is the individual or the party that takes things out of the trust. So let's say again that I have a trust and I'm selling my house out of the trust to Aaliyah. Well, I might be the grantor of the trust, and I also could be that trustee. So when it comes time to signing that deed as the seller, I am going to sign that deed as the trustee of the trust. That's how that property will transfer from the trust to Aaliyah as the buyer of that property. But also, as indicated here, kind of that second bullet point under number 2, the truster can be, you can also have a different party as the trustee. And I'll give you another example. Say my mom and dad have a trust, and it's one of those trusts that they want to use to protect their condo from the nursing home. Well, my mom and dad could be the makers of that trust, the grantors of that trust, but now they can appoint someone else like me, their son, as the third party trustee. So the grantor or the maker of the trust and the trustee, they can be the same people, but they also can be different people. It just depends on the type of trust and what we're trying to accomplish legally. So if I'm serving as that third party trustee for my mom and dad's trust, and they want to sell their condo to Aaliyah, I now will be the one that will sign that deed to convey the property from the trust to the buyer. So again, if the grantor and the trustee are the same, oftentimes you see that the grantor and the trustee are the same people, okay? And then the trustee again signs, but the trustee can also be a third party, someone different. But again, whoever the trustee is, they have to sign that real estate paperwork, sign that deed to convey the property. And then last but not least, we do see this from time to time where people will select that trustee. They will choose a bank or a fiduciary known as a corporate trustee. And again, it's the same rules. If we're taking property out of the trust and the trustee is a corporate trustee, say a bank, there is now going to be a representative at the bank, maybe in their trust department, that will execute that deed work, that will sign that paperwork to convey the property. The one thing before we move to kind of the last scenario here, the one thing I want to stress, if property is owned by a trust, it's a little bit different than if it's just owned individually or just owned jointly. You've got, now an entity, a trust that's owning this property. And I would advise before you get to your closing, before Aaliyah's working with you and you've got your real estate closing and you're ready to transfer this property, it would be a good idea to touch base with someone like Aaliyah and just make sure that she knows that the property is inside the trust. Now, Aaliyah's good. She probably already will know this. But I've gotten the phone call before where people were actually at the title company. They're actually at the closing and they said, oh, we didn't realize the property was in the trust and we need some additional paperwork. And then, we're scrambling to try to get some documentation prepared to transfer the property from the trust to that buyer. So make sure if your property is trust owned that you take a little bit of extra time. Maybe you want to touch base with your attorney and say, hey, look, I just want to let you know I'm selling this property out of the trust. Is there any special documentation that I need for the real estate transaction to take place? Okay. So now let's talk about the last scenario. And this is probably the one that I would say is the most complicated of the three, and one that I would highly recommend that we try to avoid. This is selling the property when the property is now owned by an estate. So again, how did it happen where now the property is not owned by an individual or owned by like a couple or owned by a trust? It's now owned by an estate. Usually this happens when, say, someone, maybe it's an individual that owns property, and say it's just in that individual. Say I own property and it's just in my name. I don't have the property in a trust, and I've done nothing to ensure when I pass away that that property will transfer to somebody without going through court, without going through probate. If I die as an individual and I have property just in my name, my house is just in my name, and I pass, that property now becomes part of my estate. And the only way that that property can transfer from my estate to a buyer or to a beneficiary or to my spouse is it has to go through probate. And usually, what we see in this circumstance is that this individual who passed away, the decedent, maybe they have a will, there's an executor in the will. The executor has to take the initiative now to open up a probate estate. That is usually done in the court system or in the probate court that's in the county where that individual lived. So, like I'm in Delaware County, if I pass away with property just in my name, my executor will have to open up a probate estate in Delaware County at the probate court. And that probate process, folks, in Ohio, I'm sure some people have experienced this. And if so, it's unfortunate that you experienced it because it can be avoided. That probate process in Ohio is usually somewhere between 6 and I've seen it as much as 12 months, even over a year. It's a lengthy process. There are multiple steps that you have to go through when you go through the probate process to transfer ownership from the decedent's estate to a buyer. There's attorneys involved, there's court costs. So if you can avoid probate, if there's one thing, that you take away from my portion of today's discussion, do whatever you can to ensure that when you pass away, your property does not have to go through probate. It's going to be more difficult on whoever the buyer is, who your beneficiaries are. It's going to make it more difficult on your real estate, agent, like Aaliyah. So again, probate is timely, it's costly, it's a headache, and it can be avoided. But, at the end of the day, if you pass away and your property does have to go, through the probate process, it'll eventually make its way through. But, it's a lot easier if you've taken the steps to make sure that your property will completely avoid that process.
Great. Thank you, John. And to add
Sure.
on to that, just from my experience of working with John and his clients, the best thing to do is to talk with your attorney or talk with John if you don't have an attorney and really identify what the legal considerations are before you even call us or put a sign in the yard. And the reason being is we really don't want to sell a property that is legally not able to be sold or in the position where we have the right paperwork. So when we get clients from John that everything is great, ready to go, their ducks are in a row, it allows us to really hit the ground running and move the property quickly. We typically find that the times when we run into issues with estate or trust type sales is when we start working the sale before we have the legal considerations really under wraps. So I would highly recommend that you reach out. And John, what's the best way for them? Obviously, we have your email on here, but do you do complimentary calls? What's the best way for them to start a conversation with you?
Absolutely appreciate the question. As Aaliyah and her team knows, I'm always willing to talk to somebody, and I don't charge for an initial consultation. A lot of times with folks, we're just starting with a quick 15, 20-minute phone call. Those are complimentary as well. I always like to try to figure out, is there something I can do to help you? And if so, then we'll determine what the costs are associated with that. But always willing to do a free phone call, a free Zoom, a free face-to-face meeting. And the other thing that I'll say, just I've said this to folks, I've been doing this for a little while, and I've said this to folks, avoiding probate, I think some folks think the only way you can do that is with the trust. There are multiple ways to make sure your assets go through probate. Trust is just one of those vehicles. And there are ways to make sure your property passes, without going through probate that are actually quite inexpensive, but extremely effective. It's, transfer on death affidavit. There's things that can be done, not just with your property, but with your assets. So, best way to contact me, you're always willing to, or, email me. That's totally fine. My cell number, my cell phone is just like everybody. It's with me at all times. So cell number is 614-638-3397. Anyone, listening or viewing this, Aaliyah always can get in touch with me. So even if you just go through Aaliyah, she can definitely, get us in contact with one another. But yeah, always happy to help, to see if I can help folks, streamline that process, so that you don't have to have distractions, with like legal paperwork. I mean, the real estate transaction can be, you know, it can be tough. That's why you need experts like Aaliyah. Let's not complicate it with unnecessary legal. That's the way I look at it. And if I can help you do that, I'll do it.
Great. So once you've spoken to John or your attorney and you feel confident and ready that your property is in the right legal position to be ready for sale, this is when you really need to start considering what to do to actually prepare the property. And these items don't necessarily need to be done right at the time of sale. These are things that you can also start to work on slowly over time if you know that an eventual sale is going to be in your future. So the first item that I want to really focus on with you today is to declutter and depersonalize your home. I purchased a new home last year, and from my own personal experience, when you're moving, decluttering, depersonalizing, and removing excess items from your home can become very overwhelming if you wait until the last minute. And oftentimes, people find the most stress within the selling process in this piece of the process, which is really something that can be done way ahead of time. So if you have inherited a property, or maybe your parents have a property that in the next 5 to 10 years you might be inheriting, or you know that you may be moving yourself or a family member into assisted living in the next 2 to 3 years, now is a great time to start slowly decluttering and depersonalizing your property. So what this looks like is removing excess items, excess personal mementos from the property, so that potential buyers, when they do eventually come through the home, can really imagine themselves living there. So what I recommend is that if you have any items that you have not used in your house for 1, 2, 3 years, those are great items to really start to consider. Will I be using these in the next 2 or 3 years? Are they something I'm able to donate or give away or sell? Personal mementos, so that includes photos, jewelry boxes, anything that has a little bit of a personal touch, obviously makes our house feel like home. But those are going to be items that we're going to want to slowly start to take off our walls, take out of our shelves, so that again, when it comes time for that sale, we have a very clean blank slate for buyers to look at. And I find that this piece is the area where most people struggle, because if you've been in your home for many years, you've probably filled the space that you live in. So what we've done is we've put together a great list of resources that can help with this. So don't feel like you have to do this alone. We've got some incredible people, small businesses across Central Ohio, that do a fabulous job, from helping people pack boxes to helping you move things out to selling or donating your property. And if you would like a list of these resources to start getting in touch with now, we're happy to provide that. So please reach out to us after this video. The next thing to consider as you're preparing a property for sale are some of the home maintenance things. And to circle this back to the economic and the local market conditions, cleaning and repairing the property are going to be really important during times of economic distress or economic downturn. So when inflation is a little bit higher, when interest rates are a little bit higher, buyers have less money in their pocket. What this means is that when they purchase a new home, they're going to expect that that home is move-in ready. And what we mean by that is that it does not have to be newly painted, it doesn't have to be renovated and remodeled, but they're going to expect that the major mechanicals are in working order. They're going to expect that the light bulbs are all working. They're going to expect that outlets are working. Those basic home maintenance things are things that are going to be expected by buyers when money becomes more expensive. And so again, if we wait all the way until the end to make these changes, it might feel like a big blow to your wallet, all at one time, or it might feel like a lot of work to do. So what we recommend is over the next couple of months or over the next year or two, as you prepare a property for sale, every once in a while, check on the condition of the property and ensure that if there is something that is small that needs to be repaired or fixed, that you go ahead and move forward ahead of time so that it doesn't spiral out of control and lead to any potentially bigger items that might need to be handled. And then cleaning the property obviously is a huge one. And we always recommend keeping your property in great shape on the outside and the inside. And this really helps in terms of preparing the property for sale because it's going to keep your property in good shape as time goes on. So if we clean our gutters, if we keep the outside clean, if we clean the inside and make sure there's no excess mold growth or things like that, it's going to allow, again, for a much simpler and better sale. Once we have decluttered and depersonalized, we've cleaned and we've made repairs, this is where we really want to start identifying how we're going to stage the home for the actual sale of the property. And most of the time, we can sell properties with your furniture in the home. So if you are not quite ready to move totally out before the sale, we will come back through your home a few weeks before sale and help you rearrange the furniture, your decor, to create that sense of spaciousness and flow throughout the home. We also, if you're able to, do often recommend selling properties in a vacant condition as well. So for example, if you are selling your mom and dad's home or a sibling's property and they're no longer going to be living in the home, it is okay to get the house completely cleared out and sell the property vacant. Depending on the location and the size of the home, we might be able to bring in professional staging, or we can do virtual staging where we can stage the photos to make it look like there is property there. But again, we want to create a spacious flow throughout the home. So removing that extra personal items and the extra decluttering of those extra couches, extra end tables is really going to open the space and create a great sense of spaciousness throughout the property. The next item to start thinking about as you're preparing the property is to highlight some of the key features. So what are the most important or the best features of your property? Do you have original fireplaces? Do you have hardwood floors? Are your windows floor to ceiling? Do you have tapered ceilings? What are the things that we really want to capitalize on and showcase in the photos? Those are going to be areas that we want to spend a little bit of extra time. So if you know you have a great backyard, let's really get that backyard to the best level that it can be, because that's going to most likely be the selling point of the home. And this is something, again, that we can come in and give you insight on if you're not exactly sure what might be the selling point, and help you determine how to best prepare that area or that space to get the most money for your property. And then the last couple of items to start thinking about are painting and neutralizing the property. So I know I mentioned you don't necessarily have to paint, but what we found is that putting a fresh coat of paint on a property before it goes to market is one of the best ways to ensure an easier, a faster, and a better sale. The reason for this is, of course, one, the paint creates a great clean smell. It looks fresh. It also is neutral. And so as much as I love, like my bedroom is a dark green, as much as I love that dark green and that works well for my personality, 90% of buyers probably aren't going to be able to see themselves with a dark green bedroom. And so when I go to sell my home, throwing on a light shade of paint that's going to allow for a buyer to come in and create that blank canvas is really important. And what we find is that people are always worried about the return on investment. Painting is something that we usually say you will get close to, if not 100% or more of your investment. So it is worth the money to go forward with that. And we would recommend doing this at least before you list, if not, within 1 to 2 years prior to listing. So this is something that you can do ahead of time. Finally, we want to add lighting. So we want to make sure that the property looks as bright as possible so we can highlight those key features. We want to create that warm and inviting atmosphere. So if you have an older home like I do, where I don't have a ton of overhead lighting, it might be worth investing in some lamps or making sure that our windows are totally open during showings. And then finally, we want to focus on that curb appeal. So this is the last item, and that is really to make sure that depending on the time of year, we get our landscaping done, we throw some new mulch, we clean our beds, and we keep our yard well kept. So again, to recap, these are things that you can start to do today to prepare for a sale, even if your sale is not for another 1, 2, 3, 4, even 5 years. These are items that are going to bring you a return on your investment, whether that's time or money. And they're items that are going to lead to a better sale and a better capitalization on the asset that you have. And when we know that you're selling a property for, moving to assisted living, or maybe you need that money to purchase a new home, we want to make sure that every single penny that you can get, we get for you. And part of that is that preparation piece. If you guys have questions on this, we can meet to discuss. We're happy to walk through your property and give you some property specific tips related to these items. And then the last thing we're going to talk about today, and then we'll answer any questions and let you guys go on your way, are 5 common mistakes that sellers in your position often make and things that we want you to avoid. So we want you to be the most educated sellers. So we're going to touch on a couple of items today. So number 1, and this circles right back to what I was just talking about, is do not wait to prepare your property for sale until the time it comes to sale. We want you to get your property ready ahead of time. And the reason for this is that it often takes more time than you anticipate to prepare your property. And so what happens is we get someone that calls us and says, Mom and Dad need to move to assisted living tomorrow. We need to get their home up and on the market. And they haven't taken any of those steps to help prepare the property. And so now we're rushing at the end to be able to try to get the home ready to capitalize. So it's going to take more time than you think. So start preparing early. And then again, we don't want you to wait to prepare your property because we don't want you to lose out on a strong market. If the market takes a turn for the best and we have a 1 or 2 month period where the market is really strong, we often find that there are sellers who take time to actually prepare their property and end up missing that prime spot in the market. So if you come to us in January and say, we want to sell this year, and we call you in March and say, hey, March and April look like they're going to be the best months to sell. If you are not ready to put the property on the market, you may actually miss out simply because we were not prepared. So make sure that you do not wait and you start preparing today. The second mistake that we want to avoid are pricing mistakes. So oftentimes people try to price their property either way too high or way too low. And what we find is that pricing is going to make a huge impact on the way that your sale goes and how much money you get for your property. So it's really important that you price ahead of the market. What this means is you want to understand what market you're in. Is the market on its way up? Is the market on its way down? What is the season of the market? And how are we going to price your property ahead of where the market is trending to be able to get you the most money? What we don't want to do is in a market that is trending down, we don't want to actually price above the market because we're going to end up probably at a lower spot. So what we want to do is price ahead of where the market's trending because the data shows that that is what's going to lead to the most money. And it's really important that when you price your property, you are hiring an expert to do this. So Zillow is not an expert. Online sources are not experts. Anybody that's not licensed in selling property, not going to be an expert. Your neighbor who thinks they know everything about real estate, not a pricing expert. So make sure that you hire someone to come in and properly price your home so that way we can get you the most money. The third mistake that people often make is around the actual showing of the property. We want to make sure that the property is going to be as accessible as possible. And it looks like we got a little typo there. We're all human. We want to make sure that the property is going to be as accessible as possible to as many buyers as possible. The more buyers we can get into your home, the more opportunity we have to secure an offer. So again, take your realtor's advice, but we want to make sure that if we put the home on the market on a Thursday, we want to have as much time that first weekend to have private showings, open houses. And yes, this can be difficult because it may mean that you are leaving your home for the weekend or you have to be in and out of your property for showings. But ultimately, having this flexibility and knowing what to expect is going to allow you to potentially secure as many offers as possible. The fourth thing to avoid is the lack of offer negotiations. So what this means is many buyers and sellers in this market have gotten comfortable in the market knowing that it's a strong market and offers are coming in hot. And so what's happened is because the market is strong, a lot of real estate agents and other professionals have forgotten that there's also a need to negotiate on their client's behalf. So for us, what we try to do is to not just know that you are looking for the most money, because that's a given, but we also want to know what your other priorities are. So do you need extra time in the property? Are you looking for an as is sale? What is going to make this sale a success on top of the financial implications? And how do we negotiate these things into your offer? So again, we're not just looking for the most money, but we're looking for the best all around offer. And this is where you're really going to want to leverage your agent and make sure that you're negotiating, because money can be left on the table, terms can be left on the table. And when you hire us, that's the last thing we want to do. So we want to make sure that we are negotiating on your behalf to get you the most out of this sale. And then finally, the last mistake that many clients make, specifically in the context of this webinar today, is when you have an attorney and a realtor that are not actually collaborating. So oftentimes we have been referred to clients that are in the midst of probate and they are working with an attorney who we are not familiar with. And some attorneys are not great at communicating with realtors, and they're not great at communicating with title companies and providing information on time. So make sure that your professionals, your attorney for your estate or your trust, and your real estate agent are in collaboration. They know each other, they like each other, and maybe it's something where you introduce them. But we want to make sure that your professionals are working together to get you to the closing table to ensure that we get your property sold and that we're protecting and doing the right thing on the behalf of your estate or your trust. So again, there's tons of things out there that you can do to prepare, but preparing your property with the intent to get the property sold in the next 1 to 3 years is really going to be what's going to set you ahead of everybody else and allow you to capitalize on the market and get the most for your home. So this was the end of the information for today. I'm sure John could go on for hours, just as I could, about these topics. But your next step, if you have a property that may need to be sold, or if you have questions about a property that maybe doesn't need to be sold, but you'd like to start protecting from potential probate, is to schedule your complimentary home staging and prep consultation with us. So we do this for free. We come out to the property, we walk through, we identify what resources you need. We talk about the pricing strategy, we talk about timeline, and we get everything kind of started. We have clients that we worked with for 3 and 4 years before they make a move. So it's never too early to start preparing. Please take a moment to write down our information or take a picture. You can email me or give us a call at our office. And then, like John mentioned earlier, also scheduling your complimentary call with him. You can shoot him an email, or again, feel free to reach out and we can get you connected to start talking about how to prepare your property for potential probate avoidance, or vice versa. If you would like to sell a property and need to just have some confirmation of if you're legally allowed to, again, you can have that conversation with him. John, do you have anything else to add on this piece with next steps?
No, I just had one question. Do we have a minute? Can I ask a
Sure.
question and
Yeah, no
just
problem.
one comment? Just one question going back to your prior slide, and I think you
Sure.
touched on it, but I do have a client right now, and I think I know the answer, but it might be good for anyone else who's listening. I have a client right now that I just met with, and they were, their property is in their trust, and we were kind of doing an annual review, and as we were just talking, they were thinking, hey, we might be downsizing. They're not sure yet. When is the right time that they should reach out? Like, I mean, I don't
Sure.
want them to reach out, if it's too early, but then like you brought up some really, really good points. I don't want them to lose out on, a strong market. So
Sure.
what would you advise if people are just starting to I'm just thinking about maybe I want to sell or
Yeah,
downsize?
well, here's the thing, and the answer is probably what you would anticipate, and that is it's really never too early. And especially for a downsizer scenario, or a scenario where maybe there's multiple other factors involved. Maybe there's not just the house, but there's potential retirement, or there's figuring out where we're going to go. Maybe they don't even know if they want to downsize in Ohio, or maybe they want to move to Florida. Maybe they have kids that are in town and they maybe want to move near them. Do they want to build a new home? I mean, there's a lot of factors. So what we always say is typically, if you know a move is in your future within the next 3 years, it's never too early in that time period to at least reach out and have a conversation. And the
Right.
reason being is when you have a conversation, you can then start to make the decisions about kind of honing in on your plan. And what we find is that many people think that their move is 2, 3, 4 years out. And then they actually start to talk about it and start to plan for it. And next thing you know, the perfect house came on the market 6 months later, and they felt prepared to jump on it. So I would say within a couple of years of your move, it's always great to start the conversation. I guess on the reverse side of the question, when is it too late might be the better answer or the better question to ask. I would say if you're reaching out to an agent, anything less than 3 to 6 months before the sale, it's probably too late. We can make a move, obviously. It's never too late, I should say. But 3 to 6 months out would be the shortest time before your sale that I would recommend reaching out, just from the amount of time that it's going to take to get you prepared, to get you potentially pre-approved if you're going to be purchasing a new home, and to put the plan together. So I would say anywhere between 3 to 6 months, all the way up to 2 to 3 years is a perfect time to reach out and start putting your plan together.
Awesome. And then that was my question, my comment. It's really focused around number 2 there on the screen. And this is just like an observation. I can think of one client, one family that we worked with here within the last just couple months, and the circumstances were such that they needed to sell, kind of quickly. And I just, for whatever it's worth, was really, really impressed with how you jumped in and all the information you were able to provide. Mom and dad were looking to sell, but if you recall, we were dealing with 2 sons, and one was out
Mhm.
of state, one was local. But the information that you were able to provide to them, as far as the neighborhood, that the house that was being sold, you know, um, the comps in the area, all that, what I'll call like market data that I found. I try to research things as much as I possibly can. I found that information, and I know the clients did as well. Very, very helpful. So I think it's
Sure.
more than just, you guys have a tremendous amount of research. You guys know your business, but you have a tremendous amount of resources at your fingertips that I think can help you to really, really help the client. A, make the process go very, very smoothly, and B, get the most for their property.
Yep.
And then on the other side, not over, spend when you're buying something. So
Exactly.
it was more just a comment as you were kind of
Thank
going through
you.
that. It came
Yeah,
to mind of,
It's really important to be educated on your property and to know what it's
yes.
worth and what it might be worth. And so that's another reason why reaching out early is great, because you can get a feel for what your home is worth now. You can talk to an expert about what your home might be worth in a year or two. And that may make a difference in your decision to potentially sell
Mm,
now versus later. So it's not just about the prep piece, but it's also knowing where the market's headed and how that's going to impact your property, because it may be worth selling quickly, and other times it may be worth holding on to it for a little bit, and we'll give you that advice.
yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. So like we said, if you guys have any questions, feel free to email myself or John. We would love to answer your questions, be a resource for you. And if nobody else has any, we'll give a second for anybody to put questions in the chat. But if nobody has any questions, doesn't look like we've got any questions right now. So what we'll do then is we will let you guys go. Thank you so much for being here. John, do you have any final comments or questions?
No, just thank you, and really appreciate the opportunity to do this with you, Leah.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. And we will see you next time.
Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.